Lord restored Job's losses when he prayed for his friends. Indeed, the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. Then all his brothers, all his sisters, and all those who had been his acquaintances before came to him and ate food with him in his house, and they consoled him and comforted him for all the adversity that the Lord had brought upon him. Each one gave him a piece of silver, and each a ring of gold. Now the Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning. For he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And he called the name of the first Jemimah, the name of the second Keziah, and the name of the third Keren-Happuch. In all the land were found no women so beautiful as the daughters of Job, and their father gave them an inheritance among their brothers. After this, Job lived 140 years, and saw his children and grandchildren for 4 generations. So Job died, old and full of days.
How do you care for someone who is suffering? What's the correct thing to do? What do you say? How do you say it? I've recently finished a Cert 4 in Pastoral Care and Chaplaincy. And part of the reason I pursued that study was because I really felt that caring for people was not a strength of mine. And I always found to be lacking. I would see someone was hurting, that was obvious. But when it came to helping them, I always got caught up in my mind and I didn't really know how I should act. I tended to overthink everything and would really fumble the ball as a result, I felt. But no matter how much I tried, I seemed to have a disconnect with people, I felt anyway, and I really knew I lacked something when it came to caring for people. Helping someone who's struggling, I didn't feel was a strength of mine. But I wanted it to be, because it's a part of my call, and it's part of your call as a Christian to love one another, to care for one another. Lionel last week talked about how we're all members of one body, and just like we would care for our own bodies, we should be caring for each other as one body. Part of being a mature Christian is having the skills to care for others, and I didn't feel I had those skills. And I'd listen to, you hear stories and examples of pastoral work, of these great men doing these great things, sacrificing nights and days just to help their neighbour, these extraordinary stories of great compassion. But to be honest, those stories never inspired me, they only discouraged me. Because it seemed like caring for someone was just such an investment of your time and your effort and your energy. It was just going to be too much. And I should mention too, empathy was not a strength of mine when I started this, and this was confirmed when I did start the study. One of the first things we did was an emotional intelligence test, and I've sort of replicated my results here for you. This was done by filling out some questions about yourself, and then it created this graph of the different areas of emotional intelligence. And I did fine in everything except for empathy, right? To me, it looked like you were mapping like a mysterious plane crash or something, like the communication is gone, disappeared in empathy. And so that was my empathy skills, I guess, what I considered to be a horrible, fiery plane crash. But thankfully, and praise God, with my training and experience, so some here, but mostly with Jonathan down at Portland, I've learnt ways to care for people who are struggling and to be better in my Christian walk. And I've learnt it doesn't have to be hard. One of the first things in my training that I learnt was what I was doing wrong. You see, I saw people who were hurting, not as people really, but more like a puzzle. They needed to be solved, right? Like a Rubik's Cube. This is how I'd see them. And because of this mentality, when I went to help someone, it usually came across just condescending instead of caring, right? And the reason was because I didn't look at them as a person. Like I could see them, suffering. They're angry and, there's got things they're dealing with or they've got some pain. I could see all that was wrong, but I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know how to, I saw them like a Rubik's Cube where the colours are out of order, and I didn't know how to go from out of order to in order to solve that complicated, messy problem that is life sometimes. I had this Rubik's Cube-like mentality. As I said, I just wanted to solve it, just to force it to be solved and make all the colours line up, everything nice and neat, tidy. But, well, actually, who here has played with a Rubik's Cube? Right, most of us have. Yep. Who here has solved a Rubik's Cube? Good. Yes, good. When you solved the Rubik's Cube, did you just work it out yourself? No. Half and half. Oh, well, maybe you should get up here, right? No, that's fantastic. When it comes to a Rubik's Cube, to do it without any knowledge is very, very difficult. Any knowledge of how to do it, I should say. And I've tried to do that. It's long, it's frustrating, it's very fruitless, and you end up just hating the cube. I'm pretty sure the cube hates you too. But if you know the guidelines, which there are, when it comes to solving a Rubik's Cube, the problem becomes far easier to navigate. And as I understand it, there's a few steps where when you follow them, that Rubik's Cube becomes easy. And you can take someone who has spent hundreds of hours, like probably me, trying to solve that annoying cube and show them a few simple rules, and that same person can then solve it in minutes. So that's what I'd do with people, right? I'd look at people who are hurting and I would seek solutions before I sought understanding. I was trying to solve the cube without any idea of how to solve the cube. And what would end up happening is I would just kind of force this awkward, janky solution at someone when they were opening their heart with me. Usually in the form of, you should just. You ever say that? You should just do this. If you do this, by the way, people hate it. And it basically never works. It's extraordinary, though, how complex problems can be navigated and solved following just simple rules. It's true for Rubik's Cubes, and it's true for people hurting. Not that, I should say, not that you can solve a person who is hurting, but navigating that situation can be done with simple rules. So those are the questions I had when I started my study of chaplaincy and pastoral care. And I'm glad to say I did find answers to those questions, simple rules, and I'm going to share some of them with you today. And I want to say as well, they're easy, they're simple, everyone can do them, and they don't really cost much or anything really, maybe a bit of your time. And I'm very excited to share these with you. These rules, I really believe, will help you as they've helped me in caring for people, not just within the Christian community, but outside of it. We're all called as Christians to be able to offer pastoral care to one another. A pastor is a biblically ordained position with criteria that a man must meet to hold. It's a job. Lionel is a pastor. That's his job. But pastoral care is something we're all called to do and something we should all have the skills to be able to do. We should know how to do it because it's a part of the Christian walk. It can be cheap, it can be easy, and it can become very helpful, as I've learned. So I'll give you the first rule of 3 here that we can get from the last chapter of Job, which we've read in Job 42. So the first rule, meet them where they are. In Job 42:11, it says, "Then came unto him all his brethren and all his sisters, and all they that had been of his acquaintance before." When someone is hurting, the first thing you want to do is meet them where they are. It means literally what it means. Find out where they are and go there. This is a physical reality, an emotional reality, and a spiritual reality. I was looking for Bible verses that really illustrated this, and there's a lot. I'm just going to submit Jesus' entire life. Feel free to read up on it. In Mark 5, he learns from Jairus that his daughter is dying, and he goes to her. In John 11, upon hearing of the death of Lazarus, he decides to go back to a hostile Judea to raise Lazarus. Luke 7, he comes across a funeral procession for a boy, and he goes to his mother, and it says that when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her. These are some of the examples of Christ's pastoral heart, going to people who are hurting, going to people dead and dying to give them new life. If someone is hurting, you find out where they are and you meet them there. Physically, this is obvious. You can arrange to see them in person. If COVID's taught us anything, being physically present with people is so important, and it's an essential part of productive human life. Being surrounded by people who love us is an important part of our health. And the first thing that God did when he wanted to restore Job, as we read, he sent his friends, his family, and his acquaintances to see him. He went to see them, like they went to see him, to physically be with him. If you see someone struggling, go and see them. And something I learned too, which I really like, is it doesn't have to be long. Remember, these rules are meant to be easy. 15 minutes can be enough for a visit. If someone's in pain, you don't have to sit down and have a 2-hour counselling session every time you see someone. 15 minutes can be enough. When you're down the street, a 5-minute conversation can do wonders with someone. Emotionally, someone may be hurting emotionally, right? They might be angry with someone who hurt them. They might be angry with themselves. Maybe they're angry with God. Maybe they're angry with you. You can insert into that any emotion as well, jealousy or regret or sadness. It doesn't matter. If you want to care for someone, emotionally, you find out where they are and you go there. You get to that same emotional place that they are at, which means trying to understand them, right? Try to understand them emotionally. And I should say this too, it does not mean you have to agree with them, right? You don't have to compromise on your beliefs to try and understand someone. You're trying to meet them in their struggle, right? Be a friend, a companion in a difficult time. I've received, as part of my training there, some training in counselling, and I can tell you one of the most powerful things you can do for someone who is struggling and experiencing strong emotions is to validate them. And again, it does not mean you have to agree with them. You're not saying I agree with the emotion you're feeling. You're saying that I understand the emotion you're feeling. And I really strongly encourage you to keep that in mind. And I promise if you just take that bit with you going forward, it will bear fruit in your life. Spiritually, maybe someone's hurting because they're having a conflict of conscience within themselves. Maybe they're struggling to find the meaning in something that they're doing. Maybe they find themselves in conflict with what they believe Scripture is telling them. Whatever the spiritual issue is that's causing hurt in someone's life, the rule, it's just the same. Meet them where they are. And again, does not mean you have to agree with them. It does mean you try to understand them. That sort of validation is extremely important when it comes to helping someone heal. One of the most powerful things you can say to someone who's hurting emotionally or struggling spiritually is, I understand how you feel that way, or I understand why you feel that way. Do not underestimate the power of those words in someone's life. A couple of months ago, I'd had a very busy week and I finally had some free time. So I just sort of had crashed on the couch, right, was lying there. It had been a very, very intense week and I was just lying there, just thankful to be doing nothing. Taylor and the kids, I don't know where they were, I didn't care to be honest. I was just lying there enjoying the fact that I had nothing to do. Right, lying there with no motivation to do anything. This is when my phone rang. Right, and so I answered it because it was a friend who I hadn't talked to in about 2 years. We often talked and hung out, but he moved to South Australia and we sort of lost touch. He was calling me to wish me a happy birthday and see how I was getting on. Right, and we just talked a bit and I was very honest, shared my experiences over the week. And he said those words, I understand. That phone call was extremely refreshing to my spirit in that time. It honestly made me feel like I'd had a good night's sleep. I was refreshed and I felt ready to take on the world again. That phone call too, it was minutes. It lasted minutes. But in that time, he got to where he could say, I understand to me. So that's the first rule, meet them where they are. Second rule, connect, comfort, and console. These all go hand in hand. This is why this is one rule. They're all tied together very closely. Right, the second thing that God did to restore Job was he had those who visited him share a meal with him, comfort him, and console him. Job 42:11, picking up, it says that they came to him and ate food with him in his house, and they consoled him and comforted him for all the adversity that the Lord had brought upon him. So the first thing I'm going to talk about here is connection. And the reason for that is because if someone's suffering, any comfort you offer them will be far more valuable if they feel connected to you. And the way you can do that, which is very simple, is share a meal with them. It's a great way to create connection. In October, I think it was October, I went to Bali along with some of my siblings for my sister's wedding. And food is very important to the Balinese, just as it's very important to here in Australia. I don't think there's a nation in the world where food is not an integral part of their culture. I think that's why Australia has, I don't know how many, 500 cooking shows, something like that. There might be 500 episodes of MasterChef alone, I think might be quite accurate. It's important, and when I went to Bali, I wondered if it was the same. So the morning I was there in the hotel, when I was just there alone, I went through every channel that they had on the TV, and, guess what? It was the same, 500 cooking shows. Food is an integral part of our lives. We're all involved in it, and everyone in this room has an opinion on food. Some are stronger than others, but it's universal, and it's such a great way to connect with people. One of the best ways you can establish a connection is by sharing a meal. Mankind's been using meals to connect with one another since our creation. So sharing a meal is a great way to build connection. And if you want a connection with someone, it's very important that you listen, right? You want to connect with someone, that means you want to really listen to them. You can't just stand there, as it's so easy to do, just like rubbing your hands, you can't wait for your chance to say something. It's very easy to fall in that mindset where you're thinking, I just can't wait for you to stop talking so I can say my thing. Avoid that, really avoid that. I've heard this saying, which I love, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth and expects us to use them in that proportion. Proverbs 15:2 says that the tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly, but the mouth of fools pours forth foolishness. You don't want to be someone that just pours words out at people, especially when you're talking to someone that's struggling or in a very bad place. I talked earlier about wanting to solve people's problems without really understanding them, and that proverb I think is exactly that. It's foolish to just blurt out what you're thinking all the time at someone. When you're with someone struggling, you need to listen. That means be attentive, right? You look at them, you ask them questions, you learn about them, and you don't assume anything about them. If you're talking to someone struggling as well, don't overthink it. Pastoral care, it can be easy. You don't have to solve the world's problems every time you talk to someone. Just listening can be really helpful. Galatians 6:2 tells us to carry one another's burdens, and listening can really help do that. When God restored Job, he started by sending people to share a meal, to talk to Job, to listen to Job. They shared a meal with Job and connected with Job, and I guarantee you part of that was listening to Job. If you want to connect with someone, you need to listen to them. This leads me into comfort and consoling. The people who visited Job, as we read, they comforted him and they consoled him. If you're going to offer comfort and consolation, I've learned to keep this in mind. You need to use very fair, very non-judgmental language. What does that look like? Well, here are 3 verses about language that I believe are a perfect summary. The first one is Proverbs 15:4. A gentle tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit. If someone has a broken spirit, you cannot harshly speak them out of it. You need gentle speech. Proverbs 16:24. Gracious words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul. In Colossians 4, it says, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one. When we're talking with someone who's struggling in their lot in life, if we want our tongue to be a tree of life, and if we want to lift up their spirit and their soul, we need to speak gently and we need to speak with grace. And again, I'm not saying that you compromise on what you believe. You can comfort someone and not compromise. It's very doable. And I say this too because it's very easy to feel righteous when you're always correcting someone you disagree with. When someone is suffering, right, just sitting there correcting them on every little thing that you believe is wrong. That's not going to be the best thing to do. The truth matters, as we learn, and Lionel's been touching on this. Jesus said the truth will set you free. The truth matters and is essential to our relationships, but how you give the truth also matters. We've been going through Ephesians with Lionel, and we recently saw that in Ephesians 4:15, it says that the mature Christian speaks the truth in love. So when you want to offer comfort to someone, your language matters. You want to have a gentle tongue, and you want your speech to always be with grace. It's not about compromise, as I say, it's about connecting, comforting, and consoling. And you can do that with anyone, no matter their beliefs, and not compromise on your own. And I know this is possible because in my own walk with God, His truth has comforted me, and He can't compromise. His truth has connected with me, and His truth has consoled me, and He is the same yesterday and today and forever. I'd say basically everyone in this room has felt comforted by God's truth during their life, and we're all sinners. And he's done that without compromising. That's the second rule: connect, comfort, console. Third rule: help. So again, reading Job 42:11, it says, every man also gave him a piece of money, and everyone gave an earring of gold. This is King James, by the way. So give tangible help. Sometimes when we're struggling and we're dealing with a physical problem, encouragement is helpful, and words of love are never going to be wrong. Discussing difficult themes like suffering might be fruitful. But what is also great is just getting help with the problem, the physical thing that you're dealing with. You want to be very careful not to over-spiritualize things, right? Baptists, not Pentecostals. No, sorry, that's just a friendly poke at our brothers and sisters in Christ. Right, so the friends and acquaintances of Job gave him money. And depending on your translation, right, it says it gave him a piece of silver or a gold earring or a gold ring. And when I was looking into this, I was curious to know the value of the money given to Job by his friends. And, because I just wanted an exact formula. But looking into it, I've realized we don't know the value for that. And no one can really know what Job gave him. We can value things in biblical times based on weight, market conditions, the region. But when it comes to Job in this particular bit, that knowledge is very little. And so it's basically impossible to determine a modern equivalent of what they gave Job. And, thinking on it, reflecting on it, I think that's just the point. God created everything, right? He numbers the stars, knows them by name. He preserves our entire creation. If he wanted to preserve the value of that money, he could, and he would. But he has not. And I believe that's the point. You're not going to find the value because it's not about giving, a certain perfect amount to someone in a difficult time. It's not about how much you give, it's just about giving something. Job had some spiritual issues he needed sorted out. In fact, that's really what most of the book of Job deals with. However, when God decided to restore Job, his friends gave him tangible help. When we see someone struggling, we should be looking to give them tangible help. And, this doesn't have to be money, right? Bread, clothing, furniture, technology, professional advice, personal advice. I'm not sure, some time. It can be anything. It's not about the monetary value of what you give to help. It's just about giving something. And don't let, I have to remind myself this, don't let your pride stop you giving something small. Those small gestures add up. Little by little, abundance is made. Little deeds can create a big impact. Here's an example of people giving a little in my own life. This is an example of people giving us food when our new baby was born. And if you have children, you know what the first month is like. Generally, you can just kiss a good night's sleep goodbye. That goes. 8 hours of sleep becomes the distant friend that moved to South Australia that you lost touch with. We have 2 children, Alana and Ted, and we're very lucky that both times when we had our children, friends and family brought us frozen meals, right? Individual meals in a container to be frozen. Several people did this, and some brought lots of meals. A couple of people brought just one meal, just a single meal. That was leftovers from their own cooking that they'd done. One example was someone was making a roast, and they just had this little bit left of each part, and so they put it into a container for us and gave it to us. They said, you can freeze it or eat it now or give it to your dogs even if you want. They just had a bit left over and gave it to us, this tiny amount. Multiple people did this, and the result was our freezer was just completely full. Because it got to the point where we had to actually turn their meals away. We said, look, we don't have the room, and despite our efforts, we can't eat all of it. These people were giving us tangible help when we brought home our new baby, and some gave lots, some gave just a little, but every bit of it blessed Taylor and myself. We loved it. We didn't have to cook for a month. And every single day when we were hungry, I'd get excited because I'd go to the freezer. It was like a lucky draw, And you'd open it, and there's just a great variety. And that's not condemning Taylor's cooking, by the way. She cooks a great variety of meals. There was just these new meals that you never would have even thought of having from all these different people that helped us out. Everyone has a different style of food, and so we had this great variety that we just would never have. And It was so much help in that challenging time with a newborn baby. And we had that help because a lot of people just gave a little bit. It was a huge blessing to us. So a key thing I've learned in all my training when it comes to helping people is don't be afraid and don't be ashamed to do just that little bit. When a lot of people do a little, a lot gets done. And when a lot of people give a little, a lot gets given. They're the 3 rules that I wanted to share with you today. And, we have meet them where they are, connect, comfort, console, and help. And I really want to emphasize too, make these easy on you. If you want to do something and you're thinking, it's just too hard, just scale it down. Make it easy. Make it something you feel is easy to do. You'll be surprised at how much of a blessing it'll be in someone's life. Lionel's been taking us through Ephesians, and the theme that is just continually coming up is the unity of the church. And he showed us, this might have been last week, I think, that we're called to maintain that unity. Ephesians 4, 1-6 says, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. Having good pastoral skills, such as these are just some too, is a key part to maintaining unity and maintaining peace. It's a key part to restoring peace when there is pain and when there is stress and when there is struggle. Deciding to offer pastoral care for someone doesn't need to break you, right? You don't have to rescue every single person you come across. We read at the end of Job's story that God has fully restored him. We read what I think really is a miracle. We see God-driven restoration. A man who is destitute, he is fully restored to live a full life. It's a miracle that God does here in his last chapter here of Job. Job went from having nothing, right? Nothing except stress and pain and some mediocre friends. But in the end, as we read, we see that Job had more than his beginning. He ends up with 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, 1,000 donkeys, a huge, beautiful family. He lived to a great old age. It says he died being old and full of days. That was God's work in Job's life in a time of need, right? That's God restoring this man to this greatness. And he did it. He started it by sending family, friends, and acquaintances. He didn't send pastors. He just sent everyday people